You just so happen to be born at the best time in technological history. You. Yes, you. And while some may argue it's not the best time for tech, I'd argue differently, because we live in the timeline where Next.js 13 exists. Now, before you click off of this video, I had the same issue with Next.js tutorials. Overly complicated, not relevant to my project, I barely knew React, or the video was just downright too long. But I promise by the end of this video, I will walk you through an easy guide on how to spin up a modern application in no time. Now, before we get started, I'm automatically assuming that you know how APIs work, and if you don't, here's the TLDR. Long story short is that the user will do something on the front end that sends a request to the server with information. Then the server will do something with that information and return back different information to the website. In the past, this process has been very daunting for beginners due to needing to learn libraries such as Node.js or Flask. Using React with Next.js allows us to run our backend code serverlessly, meaning we don't need to set up the backend server ourselves. The way that Next accomplishes this is by renting you a minute portion of processing powers on their servers when your API endpoint is called. I always think the best way to learn something is to dive right in and take a look at it. So to demonstrate how easy Next.js can be for robust applications, let's create a modern AI-powered chatbot powered by LangChain. First, we'll want to set up a folder and initialize the Next directory with this command. If you're following my tutorial exactly, here are the options that I selected for my Next project. The main things here are Tailwind CSS, TypeScript, and no source directory. Next, I'm going to go ahead and change the global CSS to have a white background. And for our project, we're going to be using a modern React UI library from Shadcn. And to import this library, all we need to do is run npx shadcn-ui init. We'll then import the UI elements from Shadcn that we want to use. And since this is a chatbot, we also want the text to be streamed in from LangChain. To accomplish this, we will install the Microsoft Fetch Event Source library to open and close the stream. Great, now before we can code, we're going to add two new folders to our project. The first will be API under the app folder, and the next will be chat under the components folder. Let's talk about components for a second. The best way to think about components is that they're an HTML template that can be added to your web page easily. To start, the assistant chat component here imports our UI elements, then structures them into an assistant message format with a text argument to change the message. Then we'll just do the same exact thing for our user card component as well. Now let's set up a component for the chat elements to sit inside of. Don't worry if this looks complicated. All we're doing is defining the types for our arguments, and then 1, mapping the text to either a user or assistant message, and then 2, adding a scroll area to contain the cards. Then we'll create a similar component for the user to input their message. The only difference here is we'll handle loading states and swap the placeholder based on those states. Now, as much as I'd like to say I'm a billionaire, I'm not. But that's okay. Instead, my app will have users input their own OpenAI API key to use. To do that, we'll create our first API endpoint. This endpoint will leverage the GPT-3.5 turbo model to ping OpenAI, and if the call returns a response, then the key is valid. Now we can go ahead and set up the input component that will use our API call. This component is essentially just an input box that runs a function when a key is added. When the key is added, first it calls our new endpoint with the key, and if the key is valid, it will blur it in the input box and set the key equal to a state hook that we can use in our main call to the chat. Still following? We're almost done, I promise. Now, before we put everything together, let's set up our chat endpoint. Here we'll accept post requests and look for an API key, chat model, prompt, and an assistant and user message list as parameters in the request. Then we'll leverage LangChain's callback manager functionality to set up the text streaming. And finally, we can now put all of our components together and finalize this chatbot. There's a lot going on here, so if you'd like a full look at the code, the GitHub repo is in the description. Alright, so first we add all of the components we made to the scene with their correct props, and next we define our state hooks, and then we'll create a function to run once the enter or the submit button is clicked. Now we add the new user message to the messages list. Lastly, all we need to do is make a call to our endpoint inside of a Microsoft Fetch Event Source to handle the streaming data along with our parameters, and thank you for making it to the end of the video. I've made it my personal goal this year to put out free, high-quality open source projects and videos to help educate people on things I'm learning and using on a day-to-day basis. If you could leave a like or a comment, that would definitely help motivate me to keep putting out projects like these. And don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.